Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my third build of the 10 div challenge, which is a Reap Mine Saboteur. Now, originally I was thinking about doing this as a Trickster. The whole thing I wanted to build around, the whole thing I wanted to base my character on was the Trickster Ascendancy Point Swift Killer, which gives 2 maximum frenzy, but more importantly, the thing I cared about was the 200% charge duration. My build plan was pretty simple. I was going to build around things that need that charge duration. Now, normally you think power, frenzy, endurance, but these aren't the only charges in the game. There are much other types of charges, like inspiration from the inspiration support gem, like spirit charges from lightpoacher, the helmet we're wearing, and like blood charges, which are generated when you hit an enemy with Reap and you don't kill them. Now, all of these things have charge duration and are affected by Swift Killer. Now, you can see it pretty simply. I kill these worms. You'll see these spirit charges have a 30-second duration. Normally, they would be 10 seconds. Now, my whole plan was, A, I wanted a permanent uptime on my spirit charges, and this would help me do that. And then B, I thought I could abuse the charge duration to get permanent uptime on Vaal Reap's max charges. You'll see when I do Vaal Reap here, and I hit these worms, I have 9 blood charges for 30 seconds. I thought that is fantastic. That's a massive damage boost. Now look at what happens with it at 22 seconds. It goes from 9 to 5. Unfortunately, I was just wrong. The maximum charges aren't actually affected by the charge duration. Only the regular 5 are affected by the charge duration. My whole plan where I was going to get another 60% more damage because you get 15% more damage per max blood charge or per blood charge. My whole plan there kind of fell apart. That was unfortunate because that was the cool thing I wanted to try out and see if it worked. It didn't work. You know, that's why we conduct science. That's why we try things. Luckily, the skeleton of the character is still strong enough. Reap in combination with Mines is strong. Lightpoacher in combination with Shroud of the Lightless. These 2 Abyssal Uniques are very strong together. And then on its own, a Mine character from a Saboteur. It's pretty classic. It has a lot of strong suits going for it. So even though my core concept of the max blood charges didn't work, the spirit charges still worked, and I will tell you how they work. So spirit charges, normally, you'll see I lose a charge whenever I spend a skill, or whenever I spend a skill if I have mana. So if I go and use my mana flask here to get mana, and I spend all my charges, you'll see all the charges kind of got used up. Rest in peace, spirit charges. Well, how can we play around that? It's pretty simple, actually. You need to get your mana cost, or your available mana to 0, while also making spirit charge cost mana. Now, normally, spirit charge costs no mana. The way you get spirit charge to cost mana is you have to attach either Archmage or Archmage and life tap to it. So if you're a CI character or you're a low life character that reserves all the way down to like 1 HP, the life tap plus Archmage link combo will make it so you can't cast it. Or if you deal self damage to your mana pool and always keep your mana at 0, that will work. Now, originally I was thinking maybe I could reserve all my mana. Well, if you reserve all your mana, then Archmage gives no mana cost and it doesn't work. Well, then I thought, well, maybe if I reserve all the way down to 1 mana and then I by default make the 1 mana cost go to 2 mana cost, then I can never cast it. Well, once you reserve down to 1 mana, Archmage takes the percentage of 1 and you get 0.06 mana. It doesn't round up to 1 flat mana cost. It rounds down to 0. So there are some cases where the game does actually round in your favor, and mana cost is actually one of those. I found out that if you have a skill that's like 19.6 mana cost, it will make you spend 9. It will make you spend 19 mana instead of 20 mana. So there are scenarios where the game actually works in our favor, and this is one I found out. Unfortunately, it doesn't help me because my plan to reserve down to 1 mana and then have make the cost be 2 mana, that didn't work out. So the only last solution I had, which would have been either to self-damage myself, so that way I delete my mana and then use something like a Soul Catcher so I cannot gain mana, or use something like a Shavron's Revelation so I do not regenerate mana, something to negate my mana sustain. I ultimately settled on using Omiyekons as the least amount of gear cost, because Omiyekons makes it so my mana drains 7% per second. Other than that, we're not really getting much advantage out of those boots. We're getting like 20% evasion, we're getting some percent mana, that doesn't really help us. We're getting some lightning res, we're getting some movement speed. These are pretty low power boots, but it is the only way, with the way I had my character set up, that I could figure out how to drain my mana. You'll see I'll press my flask here. I will generate the mana initially from the flask, but then that mana will quickly drain out and disappear. Now, when I have 0 mana, I'll go kill these things and I will get charges from them and I won't spend my charges. But if I accidentally press this flask while also like spamming mines, you'll see I'll quickly spend all those charges because we have just enough mana to cast this skill multiple times and then just trigger the spirit charges in quick succession, and boom, our charges are gone. So the way I needed to play this character was pretty simple, is just whenever I saw my charges getting closer to 0, I would say, okay, let me just press a vortex, let me pop some worms, get the worms killed for this. And outside of that, I wasn't really pressing my Hollow Flask unless I panicked in trying to save myself from dying. Like, say I was running through degen and I just absolutely needed the flat life this thing gives, then I would spam click it to try to save myself from a death type of situation. But all in all, you'll see we have 8 charges. It lasts 30 seconds. And pretty much whenever I get a window of a boss going to immunity phase or a boss doing some sort of attack where I can't really fight back, I would just press Vortex, I'd spam a couple worms, and I would still have my spirit charges while being able to cast skills and not spend those spirit charges. The only scenario where I'd waste the spirit charges is if the 30-second went down to 0, or, as I was saying, if I press the flask and I start spamming skills right when I have that little bit of mana, because it's about a 1-second window where you press the flask, where it goes from the 50 mana or whatever to 0, and since it's a 2 mana cost skill, you can definitely spend that on accident and delete your mana. Outside of that, it pretty much is just a miner character where you throw mines down. I have left click mine on detonate. It feels decent for mapping. It's not going to be as good as like Hex Blast mines was for me, but it still felt pretty chill, pretty relaxed. For 10 divines, I'd say not too bad, and it does decent damage. As for our tree, we went for Valbala just to get generations of our Vaal skill, so that way we could proc our Vaal Reap for the 9 max charges. I realize now that since the 9 max charges really wasn't it wasn't staying for 30 seconds. Ultimately, in hindsight, I probably wouldn't do Balbala. I would get 2 real flasks, and I would just have a regular reap here, where I just needed to reap the boss, like, 5 times initially or something, and then just throughout the boss fight, I would just reap it, essentially, once every 30 seconds is all I would have to do to maintain those max blood charges, and I would be just fine. That's kind of one of the pivotal changes I think I probably would have made to this character. Outside of that, we're basically just getting a lot of the dense, strong nodes from the shadow area. We're going for Spell Suppress. Spell Suppress is really good on the side of the tree. It's really easy to pick up if you get Inveterate plus this cluster. We went for Lucky Suppress. We also went for Low Life Petrified Blood. Because we're reserving so much life with our mines, because Reap is a life-based skill, it just makes sense with Petrified Blood character, because otherwise you're losing out on a large amount of your effective life pool. You'll see I'm reserving about 30% of my life pool anyways, so Reap, or Petrified Blood, not only gives us access to the low life damage, it also gives us access to just having a bit higher one-hit threshold, since we're going to be reserving this life anyways to do Reap mines. And then on top of that, we also have Vitality on our life pool, and then for our regular auras, outside of that, we have Defiance Banner, Grace. And Defiance Banner, Grace is essentially just to get us some evasion. We don't have great evasion, we have okay evasion. We have 16k outside of no flask. If we have a flask with evasion roll, 19k. If I had a Jade flask, which honestly I would go for 2 normal flasks and a Jade would be one of them, I bet we'd be closer to 25 to 30,000 while mapping, which would definitely up our defenses while mapping. But I'm happy with what our character ended up having here. So let's go ahead and give you guys a little showcase of what this looks like doing a map like Minotaur. And then you can make up your own mind what you think of the character. This character did exactly 5 out of 7 Ubers. We did Cirrus, surprisingly enough. I almost choked it, but I actually finished Cirrus. I failed Exarch horribly. And then Cortex, I think I just got really unlucky. I got crit reduction and fizz reduction, basically 2 mods that just destroy my single target, because if I forget to generate my spirit charges, then all I'm dealing is physical, and the monsters have 80% fizz reduction, so that deletes the damage from that portion of my single target. And then on top of that, they also had crit reduction, which also deletes a large amount of my damage. So it just ended up becoming a thing where if I don't kill them fast enough, they put enough ground degen, the fight becomes undoable, because you can't stand in that ground degen unless you have a crazy regen per second character. So anyways, let's go ahead and get into what this character looks like while mapping, and it's pretty simple. Left click mine, detonate. I have the mines, honestly, the miner playstyle has kind of grown on me in terms of, it's just, I used to think it was a lot more clunky, but since I've gotten a little bit more used to the left click on detonate, and it's just kind of like the mines are all auto targeting and everything's just kind of, it's kind of relaxing, honestly. It's just like I don't really have to think, I don't have to try too hard. This reminds me a lot of my Hex Blast miner, where the auto aiming ends up kind of deleting characters pretty well. I will say this thing, difference between my Hexblast Miner and this character is the Hexblast Miner, I really could tell I was hitting enemies a lot farther off screen. Like, I felt like the targeting was better. This skill, it feels like the enemies kind of have to be on my screen for the mines to correctly target. And sometimes it feels like the mines miss. Not always, but sometimes it does feel that way a little bit. Whether that is true or not 100% sure, but that's just a feeling I've gotten from playing with it. All in all, I'd say this character is solid, but ultimately, if I was gonna do it again, realistically, since the charge stuff didn't work, I think this build would probably be just better as probably an Inquisitor, and going a regen RF angle is maybe more the way I would lean, I think. Oh, I just realized I don't have my, my Vaal Reap. I meant to do my Vaal Reap. Okay, that's what it looks like with Vaal Reap. I don't know when I switched my keybind to Petrified Blood or whatever I had it on, but normally you get to a boss, you're like, okay, let me pop my Vaal Reap, get my 9 max blood charges, let me just delete the boss, and that's how you go about it. But I was kind of, I don't know what, I was stuck in thought thinking about something else. I forgot I switched my keybinds around. But anyways, that is the Reap Mine character for 10 Divines. My next character is, I want to try to do a melee-based character. I want to try to do a minion-based character. These two I am less comfortable with. Really, minions, I haven't done a lot of builds, so we'll see how that goes. And then melee-based characters, I'm also weaker than I am with spell-based characters, so I want to push myself out of the comfort zone with those two. And then the other two builds I have outside of that might be, I want to say I don't know, we'll see how it goes. But I have some other builds planned. I want to do about 7 builds total. This is the third one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. As always, thanks for watching. Take care, Exiles, and peace out.